Okay, so we could begin by doing 3 bows to the Buddha. 1, 2, 3. And then I'll do the salutation one time. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the fully enlightened one. Okay, and then I'm going to share the screen. Is the text visible now? I'll increase the point size.
Yes, Bhante, it is visible.
Okay, I'm going to increase the size, the text size. Okay, how is the size of the type?
Yeah, it's good, Bhante. It's very good.
Okay. Okay, so we started last week. We started the Mahanama Sutta. So this is where in the Anguttara Nikaya, the book of the sixes, and this is the 10th sutta. And the sutta begins when the Sakyan named Mahanama, probably a cousin of the Buddha or some relative, comes to the Buddha when the Buddha is living at Kapilavatthu, his home base, so to speak. And Mahanama asks, how does a noble disciple, one who has arrived at the fruit and understood the teaching? So this is indicating a disciple who has reached the plane of the noble ones, one who is at least a sotapanna, of course he's arrived at the fruit. How does he often dwell? And then the Buddha answers by explaining, he's going to explain what are called the 6 recollections. I think I mentioned I typed the word last time, but we can do it again. It's the 6 anusatis. And in the last class, we covered the recollection of the Buddha and the recollection of the Dhamma. And so now we'll continue with the other 1, 2, 3, 4 recollections. So we're in the book of sixes, so we did 2, we have 4 to go. So we have the Buddha first, recollection of the Buddha, then recollection of the Dhamma, and now we come to the recollection of the Sangha, Sangha Nusati in Pali. Yeah, these other little things are always getting in the way. Let's see what we can do with them. Okay, so here we have the English translation. First I'll read the translation, then I'll explain word by word, term by term. The noble disciple recollects the Sangha thus. The Sangha of the Blessed One's disciples, this is the Savaka Sangha, is practicing the good way, practicing the straight way, practicing the true way, practicing the proper way. That is the 4 pairs of persons, the 8 types of individuals. Okay, so let's first explain these terms. Okay, and these are rough translations. I didn't put in the Pali for this recollection. Let's see if I could get it quickly. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure that this is a good size. Maybe this way is better. Okay, so I'm giving up on trying to do it this way. Okay, so we have practicing the good way. So this is supatipanno. So we have the word patipanno. The word patipanno is originally a past participle grammatically. And you know the word, the expression, the middle way, that is patipada. So patipada is a path away, and it's based on the verb patipajati, to walk, to practice, to travel. So here the disciples are described as those who are supatipanno, practicing, literally it would be practicing well, conducting themselves well. And then the next one is ujupatipanno. The word uju means straight. And so I rendered this practicing the straight way. So literally it's straight practice. Then the third term is nyaya patipanno. And the word nyaya in its origin seems to be based on a verb, the verb meaning to know. Janati, which is derived from the root nya. And so in Pali, this becomes nyaya patipanno. So in some way, this word nyaya is connected with the verb meaning to know. And so this is, I rendered this the true way, the correct way. And the commentaries gloss this as the Noble Eightfold Path. And then we have practicing the proper way. So that it's difficult to arrive at any sort of technical distinctions between these four terms. And I think even the commentary doesn't try to impose a conceptual distinction upon them. But I found my own way of doing this, sort of this is my original commentary. And I base this on like 4 stages of the practice or the path. So I take practicing the good way represents the fulfillment of sila, of moral conduct. Okay, then practicing the straight way, ujupatipanno. So what we do in meditation, we're trying to straighten out the mind. The mind has a lot of twists, turns, knots, deviations, and we're trying to untangle those knots or straighten out those crooked bends in the mind. So I take practicing the straight way to represent the training in samadhi, the training of the mind. Then as I explained, practicing the true way is connected with the verb meaning to know, janati. So we could take this to represent the training in panya or wisdom. So we have the first three terms signifying, in my interpretation, that the Sangha has trained well in sila, moral conduct, samadhi, concentration and purification of the mind, and in wisdom. And then the fourth, it's a little problematic, samichi patipano, since I don't quite see what it ties up with very neatly. But beyond sila, samadhi, and panya comes the stage of vimutti, liberation. And so we could say that the Sangha are those who have practiced, fulfilled the practice through the attainment of liberation. So this, in the highest sense, would apply only to the arahants, but we could say that the others at the lower stages are still moving in the direction of liberation. So using this scheme, we could see the three stages of training and the fruit of the training indicated in those four expressions. Okay, then we have next what is meant here by the Sangha of the Blessed One's disciples. Usually when we hear the word Sangha in conventional way of thinking, we think of the monastic ordained disciples of in the Buddhist dispensation, of the bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, ordained monks and nuns. But here, the text is specifying that this is not the monastic Sangha as such, but this is the Sangha of the Aryan disciples. So it specifies the 4 pairs of persons, which amount to 8 types of individuals. So the 4 pairs of the 8 types of individuals will be the 4 who are on the 4 paths. Those are the irreversible paths to stream entry, once returning, non-returning, and arahatship. And at the end of those paths are the 4 fruits. So the other 4 are the 4 who have attained the fruits of those respective paths. The stream enterer, the once returner, the non-returner, and the arahat. So in this way, we have 4 pairs of persons, the 4 group together by way of path and fruit. And when you separate the path attainers from the fruit realizes, you get 8 individuals, 8 types of individuals. And then the description continues, again with roughly synonymous terms. The Sangha of the Blessed One's disciples is worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings. We'll take these terms first. And it's definitely the case here that the Buddha is picking up on Brahminical terminology and sort of reconceptualizing it, reformulating it to connect it with his own teaching. So, worthy of gifts is ahu neo. And so this is derived from the idea of ahuti, which is the oblation, the offering that the Brahmins in their rituals would make to the deities by burning the offerings in fire. So they have the sacred fire, and then they will take things like ghee, maybe wheat, I don't know, I don't have a Brahminic background, various offering items, grains, ghee, and put them into the fire. So that's the ahuti, offering to the sacred fire. And by burning the sacred fire, the offerings are supposed to contribute to sustain the world order the rita, or cosmic order. And if the offerings are not made, then there come disruptions to the cosmic order, resulting in climactic disasters, drought, floods, social disorder, conflicts, and so on. And so one makes these gifts or offerings to the sacred fire, and that is the Brahminic, the Brahminic ritual. And so the Buddha sort of reformulates that you make the offerings not to the sacred fire in order to sustain the cosmic order, but you make the offerings to the Blessed One's disciples, the Sangha of the Blessed One's disciples, because they are the ones who are worthy of the ahuti, of the sacred offering. Then worthy of hospitality, this word hospitality is actually just a strengthening of ahuneo. So it's pahu neo. I remember years ago when I was in Sri Lanka, I heard of a Sri Lankan monk who was trying to explain the qualities of the Sangha, and he said, the Sangha of the Blessed One's disciples is worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitals, or maybe he said, worthy of hospitalization. Yeah, but this is pahuneo. The way the commentary explains it, it would correspond to the idea of hospitality. Then the next, worthy of offerings, this is another term that the Buddha has taken over from Brahmanism. So when the kings, for example, or princes or royalty hire the Brahmins to perform a ritual to support their realm, to provide blessings, to gain merits, they give a certain payment to the Brahmins, which is called dakshina. They could offer them gold and silver, or offer land, offer cattle, sheep, and so on. So that is the dakshina in Sanskrit, which becomes in Pali dakina. So those are the offerings given as a sort of payment for the performance of the ritual to sustain the kingdom or to provide other benefits. And so the Buddha has taken this term over, and to be worthy of offerings is dakkineya. And so he applies it to the Sangha. So he doesn't discourage the performance of the Brahminic rituals. He doesn't tell the kings to discard the rituals, but those who are truly worthy of the offerings would be the Sangha of noble disciples. Then worthy of reverential salutation, this is Anjali Karaniyo. So reverential salutation, that is the gesture performed by joining the palms together, holding them in front of the chest or the forehead, and then slightly bowing down. So it's a gesture of respect, completely widespread in Indian culture, right down to the present day. So this is Anjali. Oops. Is it Hejang? Is that in Chinese? Yeah, in Chinese it's Hejang, joining the hands. And anybody who's practiced in the Zen tradition will know the expression gasho. One does gasho. Gasho is the same thing. Ga is probably same as Chinese he. And the show is probably the same as the jang, unless you don't have hejo, the show. So it's probably Japanese, the show part probably corresponds to the Chinese jang. And both Chinese and Japanese are renderings of Anjali. Okay, and then the Sangha, the noble Sangha, is called the unsurpassed field of merit for the world. And this is moving now from ideas that were prominent in Brahmanism to what would be the experience of many of the Buddha's lay disciples, who would be farmers, cultivators. And in the practice of cultivation, you plant the seeds during the planting season. Particularly rice farmers would be cultivating the crops of rice. They plant the seeds during the planting season. I think that's generally in March and April. And then after several months, the rice crops grow, and then they reap the harvest. And so this idea of taken from the domain of agriculture is transplanted to the spiritual domain. Actually, it would have even preceded the time of the Buddha, since people would be thinking of where do we make gifts and offerings and offer support, provide support in order to acquire merit. And of course, the Brahmins would have said that the way you gain merit is by making the offerings to support us, the Brahmins. But the Buddha replaced the Brahmins with at least at the conventional level, with the monastic community, who are representing symbolically the noble Sangha, the community of noble ones. And they become the field of merit for the world, because the gifts and support given to the Sangha are the seeds that one plants, that the seeds of generosity towards the Sangha are the seeds that are planted in one's mind stream or mental continuum in the form of wholesome karma. And then when that wholesome karma constitutes merit, and when that wholesome karma ripens, then it brings various benefits, ranging from a good rebirth, either in the human realm or the celestial realms, to prosperity, beauty, good opportunities for education and employment, and so forth. And then the highest merit, of course, would be the merit that serves as the foundation or basis for gaining enlightenment and liberation. And so the Sangha of the noble disciples becomes the unsurpassed field of merit for the world. And probably we could say that the monastic Sangha as such is a field of merit for the world, but it is the Sangha of noble ones that is the Anuttarang, the unsurpassed field of merit for the world. Okay, a question that may come up, is what about the ordinary monastic Sangha? We don't see many noble disciples, or if there are, they don't wear a label around their chests, or they don't have a special kind of robe with many decorations on it, showing that I'm a noble disciple. No grades, like grade number 1, 2, 3, 4. So how about offerings just given to the monastic Sangha? And this is what is said in the commentaries, that when one makes a gift to the Sangha, one doesn't give it thinking, I'm giving to Bhikkhu Bodhi because he's a member of the Sangha, or I'm giving to Bhikkhu, let's make up a name, Kata Punya because he's a member of the Sangha, or I'm giving to Panyananda because he's a member of the Sangha. Or I'm giving this gift to the residents of this monastery, some Bodhi Vihara, or Anguttara Vihara, or Sumana something Vihara. But one gives the gift, when one gives the gift, one does it with the thought, I am giving this gift to the entire Sangha throughout time, from the Buddha's time to the present. So the way it's done in Sri Lanka, there's a verse to be chanted when making the offerings, that one gives this gift to the Sangha, starting from the time of the Buddha with Sariputta, Moggallana, Ananda, Mahakasyapa, Anyukandanyo, who did I leave out? Mahakachana. I have to say rather apologetically in that chant, I don't know if they mention the nuns, the bhikkhunis. This is traditional culture, Buddhist culture. But we would say to the bhikkhunis, Mahapajapati Gautami, Kema Upalabanna, Kisa Gautami, and so forth, and right up to the present. And so in this way, you're not just giving the offering to a limited groups of monks or nuns, monks and nuns, but to the entire Sangha of the Buddha Gautama, from the origins right down to the present. So in that way, the gift is given to the unsurpassed field of merit for the world.
Bhante, we're having trouble hearing you.
Okay, does anybody else have that trouble?
Not really. When you move, sometimes you go backward, then we can't hear. So it's, I think your movement that makes it, yeah.
Okay, how is this?
This is good. Thank you.
Good.
Yeah.
Mine is
Sunday,
good
I
too.
think there is a number of people who are having sound issue. So there in the chat room, several people already said that they could
Oh,
hardly
yeah, I
hear
see
you.
16 people. How is this?
Perfect.
Perfect.
Much better.
I'm going to have to hold the microphone.
That's good, Bhante. Oh, no.
Yeah, maybe we could have a little stand here in front of me. Maybe not right now, but in the future we should do that. Because it seems when I put it attached to my shirt, then it shifts and then the sound gets weak.
Exactly. Sometimes you get cut off when you move.
Yeah.
Now it's good. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just hold it. Okay, so remember, this is now a recollection. So this is not a case where you're making offerings at present, but you're bringing to mind the Sangha of the noble disciples. And again, the pattern here is the same as for the other recollections. So you're recollecting the noble Sangha, those who are freed from lust, hatred, or delusion, or who at least are on the irreversible path to freedom from lust, hatred, and delusion. So when you bring them to mind, then your own mind becomes straight, based on the Sangha, the noble Sangha, and at least provisionally, the mind is released from thoughts of lust, hatred, and delusion. And then, as I explained last week, you gain this Veda, Atta Veda. The word Veda here, as I said, it's difficult to translate. It combines the sense of knowledge or understanding and joy. So I tried to capture that double sense and inspiration. You get the inspiration in the meaning, inspiration in the Dhamma, joy connected with the Dhamma. And then we have that familiar sequence. From joy comes piti. Now I use the word elation rather than rapture. And then for one with a mind, elated mind, the body and mind become tranquil. And then with that tranquility, there comes this very quiet, soft, blissful pleasure. And then based on this pleasure or blissful happiness, the mind becomes collected, concentrated in samadhi. And so that's the noble disciple who dwells in balance amidst an unbalanced population, or I explained last week, who dwells righteously amidst an unrighteous population, unafflicted amidst an afflicted population, or this could also be rendered, who dwells harmlessly amidst a harmful population. and then one. So when, yeah, please mute your microphone unless you're speaking. So by recollecting by practicing recollection of the Sangha, one is one who has entered the stream of the Dhamma, which suggests that this passage is describing the practice of the stream enterer or those higher on the path. But again, as I said last week, these are useful practices for anybody. And we'll be doing these practices on the Thanksgiving or post-Thanksgiving retreat, finding joy in the wholesome. Okay, so this is recollection of the Sangha. Let's try to cover all the recollections, then I can take questions. Okay, next comes the Silanusati. So this is recollection of Sila, and I translate this as virtuous behavior. Now, there's a common practice of taking Sila to mean the precepts, but I did a search some time ago in the Chattasangayana Tripitaka, looking only at the canonical text for Pancha Sila, and you don't find it. So that is an expression that's common to the Buddhist tradition. What we find are Pancha Sika Padani, 5 factors of training. But the 5 precepts then become the term, conventional term, used in place of the 5 factors of training. But I think the Sila itself, the way I understand it, indicates the virtuous qualities of one's behavior, virtuous behavior that is established based upon the observation of the precepts. So what one is recollecting here is one's own virtuous behavior, the behavior that accords with the precepts, or the behavior that is governed by the precepts. And this is one who is observing the precepts perfectly. So one observes them as unbroken, flawless, unblemished, unblotched. 4 terms, almost synonymous, maybe little different nuances. The commentaries explain little differences in them, but we don't have to dwell on those. And then they're said to be freeing or liberating because they liberate one when you are observing them from, it's not final liberation, but when they liberate one from engaging in behavior driven by the unwholesome mental qualities, greed, lust, anger, hatred, and others. And they are, of course, praised by the wise, praised by the Buddha himself, all of the noble disciples, and even wise people in the world, given the Indian culture, which is even outside the domain of Buddhism, will still esteem those kind of qualities: non-injury, not stealing, no sexual misconduct, truthful speech, avoiding the use of intoxicants. And this is important, that they are ungrasped, that is not grasped by way of craving, conceit, and wrong views. So when you observe the precepts and your behavior becomes good, you don't become proud and arrogant based on one's behavior and then look down on others and disparage them if they're not conforming to these standards of behavior. And then the next phrase is quite important in the Buddhist training. They are, in Pali, samadhi sangvatanika. That is, they lead to samadhi, to concentration. So you're observing these training rules that establish good standards of behavior, and then based on that good behavior, one can move and advance through the training to samadhi. And so you recollect your virtuous behavior in this way. And now this is a question that came to my mind just when I was preparing for this class. Okay, suppose we have a person who looks at their behavior and sees that they've undertaken the precepts, but they see that it's not unbroken, not flawless. You know, they get little cockroaches in their apartment and they have to dispense with them in some ways. When I was in Sri Lanka, in the hermitage, we used to get the white ants, the termites that would come and climb up unseen, undetected by us behind the bookcase and start eating the books with a special preference for books on Abhidhamma. I don't know why. Maybe because those books were printed in Sri Lanka and in Burma with using untreated paper not chemically treated, and so safer than the Western books that are printed with the paper goes through chemical processing. Okay, so your conduct is not completely flawless and unblemished. So can you do this recollection? So this is the way I would understand it. Even though you can't observe these precepts, or you're not observing the precepts perfectly, but still you have the intention, the arousing of the mind in the direction of the precepts. And so when you recollect, you could recollect these precepts and think, I've undertaken this precept to abstain from taking life, to abstain from stealing, to abstain from sexual misconduct, from false speech, from the use of intoxicants. Yeah, false speech, like sometimes maybe occasionally just to avoid hurting somebody's feelings, you have to tell like a little white lie. Or for some people, I wouldn't encourage this, but some people are devoted Buddhists, but in social settings, they might, when wine is served, they might drink a little wine. I have some friends, Buddhist friends in France, who say it's very difficult in our society to avoid that. So they're not perfectly observing the precepts flawlessly, but still you recollect that your direction of your mind or the intention of the mind is in the direction of the precepts, and you reflect the quality of the precepts and admire the beauty of the precepts that you're at least inclining towards, dedicating oneself towards, even imperfectly, and then you can rejoice in whatever your observance of the precepts, to whatever extent you can fulfill them. Okay, so that will take care of recollection of sila. Then we have the recollection of generosity. And here you have to be a little careful because there's this custom, I think any Sri Lankans will know of this, people practice generosity and then they'll put up a plaque. You help to build a library, a monastery, or a preaching hall, and then the plaque comes up, this plaque, or this preaching hall or library was generously constructed by Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, Abhinayaka. I'm just pulling the name out of a hat. Abhiratana, Bandaranayaka, whatever. Okay, I mean, you could do that, but when you practice generosity, you don't pride yourself on it and build up some kind of sense of special importance. But still, the Buddha says he encourages the disciples to recollect their generosity because this brings joy to the mind. And so this is the way one thinks, when it is truly my good fortune, my gain, that in a population amongst people obsessed by the stain of miserliness, I dwell at home. So this is the recollection of the lay disciples, with a mind devoid of the stain of miserliness. Yeah, I put in the Pali. But anyway, the terms, look, we don't really need the Pali for this. Okay, freely generous, open-handed with the expression means literally with an outstretched hand, like one is giving things with one's own hand. Oh, no, this is the one open-handed. Delighting in relinquishment, devoted to charity, delighting in giving and sharing. So this is the way that where you recollect your practice of generosity, and that should become a means of giving rise to joy and happiness, particularly because when you practice generosity, what you're doing is breaking down the barriers, the discrimination between yourself and others, and you are in a sense finding common ground between yourself and others. And you're able, if you have enough resources to share with others, then you give to others to help them. Within the traditional Buddhist frame, the practice of generosity is often framed in the older texts by way of practicing generosity towards the monastic Sangha, providing the monks, because the monks and nuns don't work at remunerative jobs that pay a salary, so they accumulate their own wealth, but they have given up the acquiring wealth, possessing wealth, and so they live in dependence on the generosity of others. And so this creates this relationship, beautiful relationship of support between the monastics and the lay community, whereby the lay people provide the monastics with their basic requisites, like the 4 main requisites: robes, the daily alms food, dwelling place, medicines, and so forth. And the lay people live, the monastics live lives dedicated to the study and practice of the Dhamma, and then when they reach sufficient level of knowledge and maturity, then they share the Dhamma through their teaching to the lay community. And so by practicing supporting the monastic community, one sort of, by supporting the lay community, one engages in this practice of generosity, of opening one's hands to provide from one's own resources, to not only help the monastics as individuals, but to be supporting the Sangha through its continuity, through time. And so from the time of the Buddha right down to the present, the Sangha has continued as an institution dependent on the support of the lay communities in whatever country, whatever historical era the Sangha has been established in. And in this way, we've had the Maurya Empire, 3rd century BC, 2nd century BC in India, it rose and fell. You've had the Roman Empire, rose and fell, the Holy Roman Empire. Persian Empire rose and fell, British Empire, Spanish Empire, Portuguese Empire, British Empire rose and fell. Now we have the American Empire. It's not yet fallen, but it's on the way out. But the monastic Sangha, people just with shaved heads, yellow or ochre or saffron robes, owning nothing, possessing nothing, still continues right down to the present day. Yeah, so this is the recollection of generosity, but it shouldn't be only generosity towards the monastic Sangha, but one should also practice generosity towards others in need. In fact, I like in some of the Mahayana texts, they speak of 3 fields of giving. There's they call it the field of reverence, the field of compassion, and the field of gratitude. So the field of reverence would be the monastic community, but also not just the Buddhist monastic community, but I guess in ancient India, even the lay Buddhists would be encouraged to support the shramanas, the ascetics of any of the spiritual sects, whether Jainism, the Brahminic ascetics, and so forth. Any of the schools would be supported by people. So that's the field of reverence. Then the field of compassion, those are the people in need, victims of natural disasters, the poor, the hungry, those who are injured, physically incapable of looking after themselves and so on. And then there's the field of gratitude. That would be one's parents, one's secular teachers, and any other benefactors towards whom one feels gratitude. So one offers gifts and practices generosity towards them. Okay, so this is the fifth recollection, the recollection of generosity. And then the sixth recollection, maybe this is not so popular today. I have to confess, I don't have any personal experience of this practice. But it would have been maybe quite widespread and quite appealing in ancient India in the Buddha's time, and maybe throughout the centuries in traditional Buddhist cultures. But the Buddha sort of gives us an interesting twist. Of course, in, say, the dominant Brahminic or so-called Hindu culture, especially in the Bhakti sects, the recollection of the deities becomes the stimulus towards devotion towards the deities, and that becomes the means of practice. So you practice devotion towards whatever your chosen Ishta Devata is, one's chosen deity, whether it could be Shiva, Vishnu, Krishna. Krishna is one of the main deities of veneration, or the female deities like Parvati, Durga, Kali in northeast India, and so on. Can I tell you my little story how I almost became a Krishna devotee? I think I told it to Venerable the other day. Okay, this is a little
Yes, please, Bhante.
a little sidetrack. Okay, this is after I finished college that summer, before I went to graduate school. This was the summer of 1966, and I had already been reading in Indian religions and Eastern religions, reading some on Buddhism, Hinduism, but there were no teachers around. This is New York City in the 1960s. But then word spread down the grapevine, there's an Indian Swami, the real thing, in New York City. In Lower Manhattan, he has a little temple there. I thought, wow, I have to go. And this was the Swami Prabhupada, the one who brought the Hare Krishna sect to America. And so I went one evening, I think it was a Friday evening. I was working that summer, so after work, I went to the Hindu temple, and the Swami gave a lecture in English with a rather thick Bengali accent. Then when the lecture was finished, then the harmonium starts playing, the very repetitive tune, and the hall is filled with young Americans, sort of post-hippie. No, this is the pre-hippie era, actually. The hippies really started late 1966, 1967. So this is 1966, but it's sort of that generation that's moving towards the hippiedom. So the young Americans who would have also been interested in Asian religions. So they are, sitting in the audience, and some of them, I guess, had been studying with the Swami for some time. So one of them picks up the drum, the South of the Indian drum, Varinga, I think it's called. And so then the chanting starts, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. And I'm thinking to myself, Jeffrey, that's my name, you're a spiritual person, start chanting along. So I'm chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. And then as the chanting proceeds, some of them get up and start dancing and turning in circles. And then I look over my shoulder, and I have two angels, one on either shoulder. One of them, we'll call it the good angel, is saying to me, Jeffrey, you want to be a spiritual person, get up and start dancing. But then the other angel on the other shoulder, the dark angel, whispers in my ear and says, Jeffrey, don't make a fool of yourself. Come on, man. You've studied philosophy. You're not going to fall for this stuff. Yeah, so I wound up not getting up and dancing and not becoming a Hare Krishna follower. Okay, so anyway, that's a little sidetrack. Okay, so we have these deities, and the Buddha mentions these are the deities in the Buddha's cosmology, the 6 sense-sphere heavens. Actually, beyond the sense-sphere heavens, we have the 4 great kings, the Tavatimsa Devas, Yamadevas, Tusita Devas, those who delight in creation, those who control what is created by others, and then the Brahma Devas and those still higher. Yeah, so that's the traditional list, but what the Buddha is encouraging is not recollecting these devas with devotion to the devas themselves, but rather one thinks to oneself that I too, and these are the qualities that lead to rebirth in the deva world, I too have the kind of faith that those deities possessed, because of which they were reborn there. I too have this sila, this good behavior, such learning, interesting addition here, such generosity and such wisdom as those deities possessed, because of which they were reborn there. And so what you're really rejoicing in is not being devoted to the deities, but the Buddha gives us a little twist to that what one is actually recollecting is one's faith, good behavior, learning, generosity, and wisdom, considered from the standpoint of being the generative causes for rebirth in these deva worlds. And that is what brings up the joy that becomes the basis for the unfolding series leading to samadhi. And so then the sequence, the rest of the sequence is the same. And then we just have the concluding sentence that the noble disciple who has arrived at the fruit and understood the teaching often dwells in just this way. Okay, so that takes care of the Mahanama Sutta, and we have some time. We could take questions, and we do it in the usual way. Something is blocking. Where do I find that? Okay. Okay, so how is the sound? How has the sound been?
Very good.
Okay. Okay, so any questions then we can take with the hand symbol. And I see one hand is Samangi.
Yes, Bhante, thank you for the teaching. I want to ask, in terms of generosity, so I tend to, I think I have, want to give all the time, but in the giving, I want to have some kind of peace and happiness that I did something good rather than I got exploited, for example.
Yeah.
So, for example, you said when you're giving to a monk, you're thinking about the whole, the lineage of monks. But if you see what you're giving right then and there, or even before you give, these monks have iPhone 15 and everything.
Have what?
And what, more than what I have, iPhone 15 or something like that.
And
So and the giving becomes a kind of a dissatisfaction rather than joy. So then I see somebody very poor, I feel like I should have given to this person instead of feeling dissatisfaction in how do you come to peace with
Okay,
this.
first, the fact that I have to say that first, the fact that a monk might have an iPhone, doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad monks.
No, just for an example,
Okay, but maybe
not simple, not
okay,
simple.
let's say the monk is living in fairly luxurious conditions. I think you have to make the decisions, just sort of assess the situation. And as I said, when you practice giving to monastics, you could do it with the thought, I'm not giving just to this particular monk, but I'm giving to the entire Sangha. Yeah, there's a little story that comes down in the commentaries. Let me see if I could bring it, recollect it. Yeah, this is supposed to, the commentary is describing that period in the future, like long in the future, when the Sangha is completely corrupted and there's little of monastic life in them, except that they're wearing like a yellow band around their necks. But otherwise, they're wearing regular civilian clothing. They have houses and farms and very worldly way of life. And somebody wants to make a gift to the Sangha, so he invites that really, there's no other good monks around, so he invites that corrupt monk to his home, makes an offering to him. But he gives it with the thought, I am giving this offering to the entire Sangha from ancient times to the present. And then he finishes the offering, and then, the monk just goes his own way. So you go do it in that way, but I think it's also important, in my view, to give to help the poor and needy. Don't just take this attitude, I give to the monastics, and that is important, and giving to the poor and needy is dispensable.
Yes,
Okay,
I actually almost feel more I want to give to the poor, but then some monks say you should give to us instead.
just follow the calling of your heart, I say.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Kilaya.
Thank you, Bhante. My question is about the qualities of the devas that are being recollected. It says faith, virtuous behavior, learning, generosity, and wisdom,
Yeah.
possessed of which they were reborn there in the respective heavens.
Yeah.
Would you say that that means that all of the devas have these qualities? Is that a logical conclusion?
My supposition would be that faith, let's say, probably the devas in each world have various strata according to the particular qualities that they've developed and the strength of those qualities. So my assumption would be that faith, sila, that's good behavior, and generosity are the passageways to the rebirth in the Deva world, whereas the learning and wisdom are sort of extra accomplishments that lead to rebirth there. So my assumption, again, would be that having those three basic qualities would tend to bring about rebirth in the Deva world. But if one also has learning in the sense of knowledge of Dhamma and wisdom in the sense of insight into the Dhamma, then one's position in the Deva world probably would lead to rebirth in higher Deva worlds and to higher standing within each of the Deva worlds.
But they would have at least one of those qualities, you think, to be in the Deva worlds?
I think they would probably need at least faith. Of course, if you don't believe in them, then I don't know. Perhaps you could, even without faith in them, if you have really good moral behavior and very generous, maybe even that's sufficient to be reborn in the Deva world. Even somebody who's like an atheist, but is very good in behavior, very generous, kind, and helpful, perhaps they could be reborn in the Deva world. And then once reborn there, then they find that rebirth is true. Yeah, I don't know, these are questions beyond my personal experience.
Thank you, Bhante.
Let us take Yorong.
Yes, Bhante. In each of the 6 paragraphs, there is a passage that's repeating, starts with a noble disciple whose mind is straight, gains inspiration and meaning, and so on and so forth, and ends with the mind is balanced. And does this passage have anything to do with Sambojjhanga? And also, is the sutta specifically spoken to householder, lay noble disciples?
Yeah, I don't see. Oh, I see. One actually sees the bojjhangas there, though they're not expressly mentioned, but we have some of the factors here are bojjhangas. Let me get this out of the way. Okay, so we have the bojjhanga of certainly of piti, that's the one translated as rapture. And then from piti, we go to tranquility. So that's passaddhi, that is one of the bojjhangas. And then, of course, we have samadhi, the mind is concentrated, that is the bojjhanga of samadhi. And then maybe you could even take this dwelling in balance, this state of samma, to be an allusion to equanimity. Yeah, that's a good point.
And also the inspiration in the meaning and the Dhamma, is that similar to the Dhamma Vichaya?
Maybe not so explicitly, though you might connect it, but it's not as clear.
Then the mind being straight, is that connected to being mindful?
I think it's not explicit.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not explicit, but
Okay. Is the sutta spoken specifically to lay noble
it's
disciples?
spoken to, well, of course, it's spoken to Mahanama the Sakyan, who is a lay disciple, and it's pretty much intended for the lay followers. Though also it's applicable also to monastics, but it's also a practice recommended, the 6 recollections for the lay followers.
Thank you.
Okay, we go on to Madeline.
Thank you, Bhante. My question is about generosity as well. And I think that I do like to give to charities that are established, but I also like to give to people on this. If I see a homeless person on the street,
Yeah.
I give them money. I come from a culture where if somebody asks you some money, the expectation is you give it.
A culture where what?
Where the expectation is if somebody asks you for money, if a beggar asks you for money, the expectation is that you will give it.
Yeah.
Some of my friends rebuke me about this and say you shouldn't give money to these people because they'll just spend it on drugs or alcohol or something.
Yeah,
so my answer to that is, well, I give with Dhamma in my heart. What they do with the money is their karma. So what do you think of that approach?
I'd say one has to be a bit discerning or discriminating. Like if you think it's likely that the person will spend that money on drink or drugs, then I say don't give. But if, I think people who don't want to give use that as an excuse to avoid practicing giving. So if you think that the person is really in need, then you can give the money, even though you might have a slight suspicion that they might use it in improper ways. But if you have a pretty strong conviction that they're going to abuse your generosity by using the money for drink or narcotics, then give elsewhere to charities or to people in need who you can pretty strongly believe will use it to meet their real needs, their material needs.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, I see 2 more questions. That will have to be the limit because we'll have to go up for the meal. So next is Joshua.
Thank you, Bhante. I have a question about the role and function of the Sangha. Is there an implication of a salvific nature of the Sangha? In other words, without the existence of the Sangha, the world would not exist. In Judaism, there's this notion of 46 righteous individuals upon which the world is based, exists. And I was wondering if the Sangha is kind of that same kind of notion here.
Yeah, I haven't come across that idea in Buddhism. Though
Okay.
it said it's when there's a sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya that I dealt with long ago. I think it's in the Book of Threes. It speaks about kings should be righteous. And then when the kings are righteous, then all below the kings observe righteousness. Then the world is in a state of harmony, prosperity, unity, and so forth. But it's when the kings become corrupted, then their ministers become corrupt, the people in society become corrupt, and then the world plunges into a kind of disaster, including natural disasters. Okay, I'll have to take now the one more
Thank you.
question. Yeah. This is Sophia.
Hello, thank you so much. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, you have to speak more loudly.
More loudly. Okay, can you hear me like that?
Yeah, this is better.
Okay, thank you. So my question actually is actually, could you? I wanted to ask something about generosity as well, but just maybe like a quick one. Can you explain the term bahusacca, what it means?
Bahusacca.
I don't seem to, sorry, it's a bit off topic. I don't seem to be able to find a good definition for it.
Bahusacca.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not in the sutta. Bahusacca
Yeah.
means abundant learning, having extensive learning, whether
Of
in
the
regard to
suttas?
the Dhamma or in regard to secular matters.
Mm. Because so just the question, my question would be also about generosity, which I'm referring to a text by the Venerable Lady Sayadaw, who says that individuals who really want to be part of the next Buddha Sasana, they should really focus their efforts on giving donations, and those who don't, because they're more want to go more in a hurry, so to speak, or they should focus on things like bahusacca, for example. So I wanted to ask you if you know something about that topic, and because it seems like sometimes it's like a bit of a conflict whether to just go inside and withdraw, or go out and share and give donations.
Yeah, I think the best approach is to combine both. But one has to find according to one's own natural proclivities. Okay, I think we'll have to end for the day because we'll have to go up for the meal now. So we're going to end with the dedication of the merits and then with the 3 vows to the Buddha. So I'll recite the verses for the sharing of the merits. Akasata chabumata deva nagamahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanam. Akasata chabumata deva nagamahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanam. Akasata chabumata Deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mang parang dukha pata chani dukha baya pata chani baya soka pata chani soka hantu sabepi panino. And then I dedicate this specifically to the people of the Gaza Strip, people in Ukraine, and the people in Myanmar, with the English translation of the verse. May those in suffering be free from suffering. May those in fear be free from fear. May those in sorrow be free from sorrow. May all beings also be thus. And then we can stand and do 3 bows to the Buddha.
Thank you, Bhante. Thank you.
Thank you, Bande.
Okay, just we do the 3 bows in the end.
Thank you, Bhante. May you be well.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante, for the teaching always.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
One Saranai. Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, so thank you.
You all, everyone. Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you all for joining today.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you,
Thank
Bhante.
you,
Thiruvan
Bhante.
Saranai, Namo
Thank
Buddhaya.
you.
Be
Thank
well,
you,
Bhante.
Bhante.
Enjoy your lunch. Take care of your health.
Thank you,
See you on Wednesday, Bhante. Thank you. Namo Buddhaya.
Thank you, Bhante.
Very much,
Take care, Bhante. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Be well.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, so I'm going to end the session.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Bhante.
Bhante.